Hi everyone, I'm Steph and this is information video about stimming for Neuro Pride Ireland 2021. So basically the question really is, what is stimming? And the reason we need to ask this is because unfortunately, it's something that sometimes people know about. It's something that unfortunately kind of gets misunderstood. It's the experts who aren't really expert, maybe. So, have you ever heard of stimming? And what do you reckon it is? Very often the answer to that is not quite in line with what it really is. So you're about to find out, and it might not be what you imagine it to be. So usually stimming in the literature gets described as repetitive behaviors and mannerisms, and it's often described as being non-functional. Okay, so it's just something inexplicable, no purpose, and if anything, regarded as a problem. It's difficult behavior or disruptive behavior and things like that. Well, let's kind of turn that on its head. Stimming, something that's often associated with autistic people, but in reality, it's under various different names. It is quite common and is found amongst a lot of other people. For autistics, typically it's described as things like rocking and tapping and flapping and humming and spinning, flapping hands, and my personal favorite, which is kind of rocking forwards and back like that, or whatever it might be. But other people stim too. And in fact, a bit of a spoiler, everybody stims. And I'm going to talk you through that. It's very, very commonplace. And it absolutely is not some sort of bad behavior. It's actually something very positive. So the breakdown of what it is that stimming actually is. First of all, it is functional. It does serve a purpose. It does something, and it does it in an effective way and an efficient way. It's a good way of doing what it does, and it's normal. It's actually normal. It's so normal. It's boringly normal. It's so normal that people don't even have a name for it unless it's an autistic person doing it usually. Stimming is normal. Let's go and talk through that. Here's some examples from reasonably everyday life of people stimming. This is what stimming is like when it's not being done by an autistic person. Wringing your hands in grief or holding your head because you're upset. Pacing up and down nervously because you're waiting to go on stage or you're thinking your way through a problem. Tapping a pen while listening to people. Twirling your hair, clenching your hands nervously, jumping and cheering to celebrate. Anybody who's been watching the Olympics the last few days may have been involved in some jumping and cheering, or the Euros football recently. That's just stimming. And understanding how that is just stimming is easy to explain. This is how does it work? Okay, those examples give you a clue. What drives stimming is intense emotion. Often it's a negative emotion simply because stimming is associated with regulating that emotion to an extent a lot of the time. And what we usually want to regulate is a negative experience, a negative emotion. But it can be anything. It could be grief, it could be joy, anxiety, anticipation, frustration, it could be anger, it could be infuriation, it can be angst, it could be love, it could be all these things. Really, it's just what humans do. And this is how it works, really. It's about externalizing your feelings. So stimming is just how humans, all humans, express emotion. And I think maybe the last couple of slides have kind of given some insight into how that works. We all do it. And it works because it helps us to regulate so that we don't overload. So if you are deeply distressed, then being able to feel like being deeply distressed, you feel like you don't have the opportunity to take action to remedy something. So feeling like you can actually do something physical, moving your body, helps you to work that energy that out of your system. But also things like, you've been there anticipating a goal in a football match or something, and the goal gets scored. What do you want to do? You want to release that emotion. That's what it is. It's just how we do stuff. But it also allows us to communicate, because when somebody's doing that, it's signaling, and they say that all behavior is communication. And this is kind of how it works, because when somebody's acting out their emotions, they're extending you a message. And from the other side of the room, you can see that that person is delighted or upset or nervous by the way they're stimming, really. And it works for autistic people, but it works for all of us, and all you need to do is understand some of that language, if you like, and treat it as communication, and you can actually tell what people are thinking and how they're feeling. But stims can do more. What else can stims do? Regulating emotions is a thing in itself. I mean, it has its purpose, but it also helps us when we need to focus. For example, we need to study, or we need to kind of like work out a problem or think through something. Regulating your emotions helps you to clear your mind. People talk about, oh, I was too distressed to think about it. I couldn't. I had to calm down before I could actually work out what I wanted to do next. Why? Because that stuff's all rolling around in your head and stuff. You need to kind of calm it down. You need to regulate it. You need to quiet it down so you can think. But that's a cool technique, because if you actually use those techniques, you can use it to establish a calm state and make it easier to focus. And one of the things that gets associated, particularly with autistic people, is this idea of hyperfocus, and getting into that state of mind where you can just focus in on a specific thing for a long period of time and get kind of really engrossed in it and kind of get into a flow state. That's, if you like, kind of like repurposing the techniques of stimming in certain ways. It makes that a lot easier to do and allows you to actually become very, very focused in on a specific thing when you need to. So it helps us to focus. It helps us to pay more attention. It helps us to analyze situations and make decisions, because it's kind of like the way kind of things like meditation and mindfulness and stuff work as well. And Tai Chi, it's about bringing down the stuff that could be a distraction and allowing you to focus in on the thing that matters. And once you do that, of course, obviously you've kind of had a chance to sort of analyze in a rational way, like a rational human being. And that allows you to choose what actions you want to take then, and allows you to choose them in a way that has been thought out and not just impulsive. And that's kind of an important thing in order to sort of make good decisions and act on them. This is kind of looping back on itself a little bit, but just to kind of add a little bit more detail. All humans need structure. We live in a confusing world. We created a confusing world, and we live in a very complex social environment. We're a social species, but we live in large groups, countries, cities, even just, towns and communities and schools and colleges and workplaces can have dozens and hundreds of people that you have to interact with. That's quite a complex social environment to negotiate, but we also have to deal with non-social environmental complexities as well, and having rules and customs and laws, traditions, standards, working practices, all these kind of things help us to kind of know how things are probably going to go, and that gives us a little bit of predictability, and that allows us to focus in on making good decisions and taking the right kinds of actions. And you can see where stimming fits in there. If somebody feels like things are chaotic or disordered or unpredictable, and often, particularly for autistic people, that can be the case because the world isn't designed for autistic people by any means. Stimming is one of those methods you can use to actually establish a sense of order and structure and make it easier for you to go and get on with your daily living and so on. So when we stim, we do it primarily to generate structure, restore structure within our lives and so on, and eliminate the uncertain. So we do it because we need extra structure in order to focus. When we're anxious and uncertain, again, like the pacing up and down and swinging our hands and so on to try and get that sense of stress and anticipation out of your system. And structured activities help us to regain a sense of order and rhythm and re-establish control. This is because the world feels chaotic and disordered to autistic people an awful lot of time, and not just for autistic people. There are other things. One of the ones that doesn't get mentioned, but is actually a perfect parallel, is what are called blindisms, and people in blind and deaf-blind communities are known to do this as well, where they will essentially do what looks just like stimming, and they're doing it because of re-establishing a sense of balance and perspective and establishing, a sense of their own body and three-dimensional space and the environment and their feelings and all these kinds of things. And it's actually kind of doing the same thing, really. It's just a different kind of context. And then the most important thing, stims are functional and they're efficient and they're effective and they do things. They're practical techniques and tools for making life more livable, but also you can go and push them out the other side and simply use them for their kind of positive emotional benefits and just do it for fun. And there are some stims which have really no association with anything other than just enhances feeling good. Spinning is one, jumping up and down is another. Quite often things like flapping your hands or rocking backwards and forwards are ones that have been repurposed from being regulatory to actually being a way to enhance a positive feeling. And it's just nice to do, it's nice. It's just like, why do you dance to music? Because you're enhancing your emotional state through physical repetitive actions. This is the same thing. It's the same thing. And the reason why this video exists is because stimming has got a bad press, particularly because it tends to get associated with kind of like disruptive behavior in classrooms, being distracting and irritating other people and so on. And I think part of that is because it's not understood. And because it's not understood, it's actually seen as inexplicable and not functional. And therefore, it can be dispensed with without taking away functionality from somebody. But very often, it's the opposite. It's actually serving a purpose, a practical purpose, helping a kid concentrate and focus and remain attentive in class, helping us to regulate emotions, helping us to focus and pay attention. And the idea of suppressing stims just because they're allegedly bad, and they're only bad because they're not understood, well, we need to turn that on its head. And hopefully this video has been a little bit of an opportunity for you to kind of get an insight that helps you to do that. So what can you do to help then? Well, you've watched this video and you've got a little bit of information. Go and find out more. Go and find out more about stimming and explore the idea and listen to people who stim and find out their perspective of what it does for them. But then also, if you have the advantage of being heard in situations, for example, as an SNA or a teacher in a school, or some person in a workplace or in a college, or just amongst a group of friends or a member of family, whatever it might be. If you have the advantage of being heard and not having your voice dismissed, you can use that advantage to change the negative view of stimming by injecting this perspective and using your privilege, as they call it, to sort of lend weight to that perspective and help to change other people's view. And more than that, you can actually support stimming and people who stim by promoting the idea of stimming as a way to regulate and a way to communicate and a way to focus and a way to learn. Because quite often it is used as a way to learn. It's actually used as a kind of a memorization rhythm that you can kind of build ideas on. You can structure thoughts on. It becomes like a framework to actually attach ideas and concepts to. And this is all good stuff. This is actually kind of what people do in other ways. It's just sometimes people need to use kind of slightly more powerful tools to do that. And you can help just by pushing forward those ideas and making them normal. So hopefully this has been a positive take on what stimming is about, and I think it's important that we do celebrate stimming, and as staying sort of saying, respect the stimmer, respect the stem. Respect is important, and being able to signal that sense of respect is really important to somebody, especially if they feel vulnerable. So if you're respecting a person and you're celebrating their stimming as a positive and a functional and useful thing to do, then that's going to help us. Thank you. And just a little twist at the end, because autistic people are kind of expert at using stims, and because everybody uses stims and they're actually useful for everyone, there is an opportunity here as well to go beyond all of this, and look at whether those autistic experts in stimming might be able to help non-autistic people learn a few extra tricks, learn ways to use stims, be taught by autistic people about these techniques, and actually take them into your own life and see if they can help you, because really these are just normal human responses to normal human experiences. And if somebody's got a cool way of dealing with it, maybe they can teach you a few extra little tricks to help you in your life as well. And here's a few little links at the end. Courtesy of me, it's been one of my pet subjects. I did a blog post, which is the first link there, recently, on the subject of same kind of thing, kind of an introduction to stimming, but also it's something I've been working on for a lot of years, and there is a kind of quite a long, slightly outdated, but mostly pretty useful stuff, more detailed set of posts which are up on the Autistic Union Facebook page. Comes in 3 parts, and they kind of build an argument, if you like. One of the first time somebody has built a really kind of long, detailed argument about the functionality and usefulness of stims. So maybe it's a good grounding to start from there, but explore beyond that. Go and look at other stuff. There's plenty of people out there who've talked about stimming, and see if there's a place for it in your life, maybe. Okay, hopefully that was a little bit surprising and a little bit interesting. Thanks for listening.